Welcome to Dear Fans. Caitlin Clark stopped at her high school to say hello only to run into a childhood friend she never thought she'd see again. What happened next was unbelievable. Emily Turner stood in front of the classroom teaching the students the final lesson of the day. As she explained a math problem, Emily's marker gently stroked the board while the students listened attentively, but at the back some students whispered and giggled, distracting Emily from what she was explaining. Markers weren't as real as she thought they were. They were pristine. "What's going on?" Emily turned to ask the class. As loud laughter erupted, she stared at them with a stern gaze, and the laughter quickly stopped. Emily wanted to probe further, but the school bell rang. It was closing time. The students' noise grew louder as they rushed out of the classroom. "I'm not meant to be here," Emily whispered under her breath, but what could she do about it? "Finally, the day is over," Emily said as she sank into her chair. The classroom was now silent. With her all alone, Emily took out her phone to check her messages as Coach Henderson, an older woman in her 60s, walked in. "Hey, Emily, how was class today?" Coach Henderson asked. Emily looked up from her phone and nodded. "It was okay, but these kids are stressful." Coach Henderson laughed and told Emily, "You were worse during your time. I remember how you used to drive your teachers crazy. You were one of the feistiest students back then." Emily shook her head. "I wasn't like these students I teach," she said. Coach Henderson chuckled. "Well, I've got some exciting news, Emily, and you won't believe what I'm about to say to you. Remember Caitlin Clark?" Emily stared blankly at the coach, trying to recall the name, but then shook her head. "No, I don't remember anyone with that name." Coach Henderson was shocked. "How can you not remember Caitlin Clark? Regardless, I'll help jog your memory," the coach said. Still, Emily's expression remained unchanged. Coach Henderson couldn't believe what Emily was saying, so she took out her phone. Scrolling through her pictures, she showed Emily a photo of Caitlin Clark in an Iowa hockey jersey. "Do you remember Caitlin now? She was your classmate in high school. You two were best friends. I was your basketball coach back then." "Remember?" Emily's face changed as she finally remembered. She returned the coach's phone, and memories of Caitlin flooded her mind. Memories of walking together through the school halls and playing on the basketball court. "Joe, what about Caitlin?" Emily asked. "She's coming to the basketball game on Friday," Coach Henderson explained. She had reached out to Caitlin on Instagram to see if the rising basketball star remembered her old coach. Surprisingly, Caitlin replied and told her she would be in town for the game. "This is great news," Emily said as Coach Henderson urged her not to miss the game on Friday. Emily sat all alone in the empty classroom with the coach's words echoing in her mind. Caitlin Clark was coming to Eastwood High School on Friday. This was unexpected, and the thought of it made her heart race, not with excitement, but with anxiety. Emily picked up her phone and typed Caitlin Clark in a web search. Within seconds, countless pictures of Caitlin filled the screen. Emily selected one and stared at it. There was her old classmate Caitlin Clark, now one of the biggest college basketball stars in the country. How could she have ever forgotten her? Emily recalled their high school days right here at Eastwood High, the same school where she was now a teacher. She thought about the hours they spent together on the basketball court, sharing dreams of playing in the NCAA or even going pro. But having dreams wasn't enough. Caitlin had gone to play college basketball at Iowa, while Emily had gone to a state university on a scholarship. She was also chasing her dreams of playing basketball, but along the way life threw her a curveball. Weather went to Boston and Wyoming. What happened? Keep watching to find out. Emily and her friends had gone out partying to celebrate a teammate's birthday. They didn't drink too much, but on their way home their car skidded off the road and slammed into a tree. As the driver lost control, everyone in the car sustained injuries, but Emily's were the most severe. It was her knee. The injury was devastating and took over 6 months to heal. However, Emily wasn't the same after that. "You'll walk, Emily, but you won't be able to play basketball at a professional level," the doctor told her. Emily couldn't believe her ears. She argued with the doctor and was determined to prove him wrong. After months of rehab, she finally returned to the court, but every time she jumped or landed, pain shot through her knees. She knew she wasn't fit enough to play anymore. She sobbed for weeks, knowing her dreams of playing professional basketball were over. Eventually, the school revoked her scholarship because she couldn't compete at the collegiate level. Defeated, Emily gave up on basketball and switched her focus to another career. But things didn't get any easier for Emily. They only got worse. She ran her hands over her face and put her phone down, overwhelmed by memories of Caitlin and everything they used to dream of together. She couldn't believe she had tried to block out the past. Lying to Coach Henderson about not remembering Caitlin, the truth was too painful to Face Caitlin had achieved their dream, while Emily was now a teacher in the same high school where they used to roam the halls as students' life had been cruel to her. She had lost everything: her car, her business, her marriage, and her home. Emily was now broke and homeless. However, things hadn't always been this way for Emily. After college, she had started a small event planning business. It was successful for a few years, and she thought she was on the right track. Shortly after marrying her now ex-husband Daniel, Emily's business began to struggle. She took on loans to keep it afloat, but the debt kept piling up. One day, she woke up to find her life in ruins. Her business had failed, her husband had left her, and she was left with nothing but the clothes on her back. Emily prepared to quit her job. Recently, his family, too, had been brought to the precipice and the destruction of everything they had built. Eventually, Emily found herself teaching at Eastwood High. Grateful the principal had offered her a job just 1 month ago, it was her only means of survival. Later that evening, Emily scrolled through Caitlin Clark's Instagram page. Her feed was filled with pictures of luxurious homes, charity events, trophies, and celebrations. The images sent a cold chill through Emily. What would Caitlin think of her now? Would she even recognize her old friend? Emily asked herself these questions, sighing deeply. She wasn't sure she wanted to see Caitlin or any of her old classmates. Shoving her phone into her pocket, Emily stood up and headed to the basketball locker room. It was empty, so she quickly undressed and ran into the showers to clean up. This had become her nightly routine. After school, she would shower before heading to the shelter where she slept, but this time Emily stayed longer in the shower, lost to her thoughts about Caitlin and what could have been if she hadn't injured her knee. Suddenly, the sound of female voices snapped Emily out of her thoughts. She froze, her heart pounding. The voices grew louder and closer. "What are they doing in the locker room?" Emily whispered to herself. "Let's check the showers," one of the girls said. Panicking, Emily quickly slammed the shower door with her hand. The girls screamed and ran out laughing. That was close, Emily muttered, relieved. She quickly got dressed and left the school building, realizing she needed to find another place to bathe before she got caught. As she walked into the cool evening air, her thoughts drifted back to Caitlin. Friday was only a few days away, and Emily still hadn't figured out how to avoid the basketball game. Emily walked over to the library and buried herself in preparing lessons for the next day, hoping it would distract her. But no matter how hard she tried to focus, her mind kept replaying memories of Caitlin and their time together. Frustrated, Emily closed her book and headed to the shelter where she was staying. When she arrived, Emily greeted the other residents and went to her usual corner. The room was crowded with mats and blankets scattered all over the floor. She laid down, pulling a thin blanket over herself as she stared up at the ceiling. This time, she didn't fight the memories of Caitlin. Eventually, she drifted off to sleep. The days passed quickly, and soon game day arrived. The school buzzed with excitement about Caitlin Clark's visit and the big basketball game. Meanwhile, Emily tried to keep her head down, rushing through her lessons in class. Her plan was simple: finish the day and leave before anyone could convince her to attend the game. When the closing bell rang, Emily breathed a sigh of relief as her students packed their bags and her out of the classroom. But just as she was about to leave, Coach Henderson appeared at the door. "Emily, how was class today?" the coach asked. "Fine," Emily replied, keeping her answer short. "I hope you're not planning to miss the game tonight," Coach Henderson said with a knowing smile. "Remember, your old friend is coming." Emily forced a nod. Even though she had no intention of attending, she stayed in her classroom for another hour, hoping the excitement would die down before she left. Finally, she grabbed her bag and headed to the locker room for a quick shower, thinking most students would either be gone or at the gym. But something unexpected happened. As Emily was about to undress, she heard a deep, familiar voice in the locker room. Her heart raced as she recognized the other voice. It was Coach Henderson. It was too late for her to hide. Standing right in front of her was a tall, athletic woman with a friendly smile. "Caitlin Clark." Emily froze, staring at Caitlin as silence filled the locker room. "You look familiar," Caitlin said, tilting her head as if trying to place Emily's face. "Coach, who is she?" Caitlin asked, again turning to Coach Henderson. "That's Emily Turner," the coach replied. Caitlin's eyes widened in surprise. "No way," she exclaimed, a big grin spreading across her face. "Emily, I can't believe it." Before Emily could say anything, Caitlin pulled her into a warm hug. "What are you doing here, Emily?" Caitlin asked, still smiling. Emily hesitated, unsure of how to answer, but Coach Henderson stepped in. "She's a fourth-grade teacher here now," the coach explained. "Teaching," Caitlin said, surprised. "That wasn't your thing?" "Emily, we have a lot to catch up on, but that can wait. Come on, let's go address the team together." Emily tried to decline, but Caitlin wouldn't take no for an answer. Together, they went to the gym where Caitlin spoke to the team with Emily by her side. Caitlin shared stories of her high school days and talked about how she and Emily used to play basketball together. The students were amazed. Turner played with Caitlin Clark. They whispered among themselves after the pep talk. The game began. Caitlin made sure Emily sat next to her throughout the game. They laughed, chatted about the players, and cheered together as the team played. At the end of the game, the school's team won, and the crowd erupted in cheers. After the game, Caitlin insisted that Emily join her for dinner. They went to a small, cozy diner nearby where they talked about their shared memories and the glory days of high school basketball. The conversation was filled with laughter, and for a moment, Emily felt like she had traveled back in time. Everything was going well until Kate leaned forward and asked, "So, Emily, what happened? What happened to our dreams?" Emily froze, her smile fading. She hesitated, searching for the right words, but all she could manage was nothing. Kane stared at her, sensing there was more to the story, but Emily wouldn't say anything else, not wanting to press her. Kaylin let it go instead. Caitlin pulled out her phone and handed it to Emily. "Here's my number, call me if you ever need anything," she said with a warm smile. Emily thanked her as they would walk to Caitlin's car. When Caitlin offered to give Emily a ride home, Emily quickly declined. "My house is just around the corner," she lied. "You don't have to worry." Caitlin hesitated, clearly unconvinced, but she didn't push. "All right," she said, getting into her car. "Take care of yourself, Emily, and call me, okay?" Emily watched as Caitlin drove off, her chest tightening with guilt. Instead of heading back to the shelter, Emily took the long way around, hoping Caitlin wouldn't see where she was really going. When she finally arrived at the shelter, it was crowded, and there was no space left for her inside. She joined a group of people sleeping on the sidewalk outside, wrapping herself in a thin blanket to keep warm as she stared up at the night sky. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Memories of Caitlin and their dreams haunted her, making the ACH in her chest even worse. Unbeknownst to Emily, Caitlin had followed her, sitting in her car a short distance away. Caitlin watched as Emily settled on the sidewalk. Her heart broke at the sight of her old friend sleeping outside in the cold. "Let's go home," Caitlin told her driver, wiping away tears. The next morning, Emily woke to the gentle nudge of the shelter manager, Mrs. Green. "Good morning, Emily," Mrs. Green said with a smile. Emily yawned and sat up, confused. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," Mrs. Green replied, "but come with me." Emily followed Mrs. Green, who led her to a cab waiting nearby. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, but Mrs. Green only smiled and said, "You'll see." The cab drove for several minutes before stopping in front of a beautiful two-bedroom apartment. "What's going on?" Emily asked as they stepped out of the car. Mrs. Green led her inside the apartment, which was warmly decorated with new furniture. Emily stood by the door, unsure of what to say when Mrs. Green handed her a set of keys. "This is yours," Mrs. Green said with a smile. Emily's eyes widened in shock. How I don't understand," she stammered. Mrs. Green pointed to a glass table in the living room where an envelope sat. "Go on," she said. Emily walked over to the table, her hands trembling as she picked up the envelope. Written on the front were the words, "From your childhood friend, Caitlin Clark." Emily whispered the words, tears welling in her eyes. She opened the envelope and pulled out a set of documents. Her heart raced as she realized what they were, the deed to the apartment with her name on it. But that wasn't all. As Emily flipped through the papers, a check fell out. She picked it up and gasped when she saw the amount, $5 million. Emily dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by emotion. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the documents and the check. After a moment, she grabbed her phone and dialed Caitlin's number. "Hello." Caitlin's familiar voice answered. Emily's voice shook as she said, "Caitlin, thank you so much." On the other end of the line, Caitlin's voice was calm and warm. "Just take care of yourself, Emily, and remember, I'm always just a call away." Emily couldn't believe what had just happened. She wondered how Caitlin had known about her situation. Later, she asked Mrs. Green if she had told Caitlin anything, but Mrs. Green denied it. Caitlin never admitted it either, never telling Emily she had followed her that night and seen her sleeping on the sidewalk today. Emily Turner is a successful businesswoman in Texas. She often says she owes it all to Caitlin Clark's kindness, a reminder that true friends never forget each other. Like this video and subscribe this channel. Thank you.